together way back in 2011
Yeah.
on Treasure Inside. And since our work together, you've written other books as well.
Right.
Why is this book so important to you to add to your library?
You know, it's a funny story because sometimes things that they don't seem that significant to you, but they strike somebody else. Some of the things that we ended up writing about in the book were things that I have taught in leadership development programs. And one of our team members, Andy Johnson, sat in on one of my presentations, and afterward he said, "Ron, you got to put that in a book. You got to put that in a book." And I thought, really? So then the next time I gave that talk, I recorded it and sent it to you and asked you to listen to it, because I really respect your judgment a lot. And you said, yeah, I think this would be good for us to work on.
I think I had a more enthusiastic response than that. But I actually remember that I went on a walk and I listened to, I think it was a little over an hour, maybe an hour and a half that you sent me of audio. I think I was in the Boise foothills, and I remember listening to this audio and just being really blown away by the concepts in it. And I mean, that in and of itself could have been a book, a easy, straight shooting book, but it turned into a story.
Yeah, so when we got together to work on it, there's this statement that I remember. I think it's from Oliver Wendell Holmes. He said, I wouldn't give a fig for simplicity on the near side of complexity, but I'd give my right arm for simplicity on the far side of complexity.
Okay.
And I think part of what happened for me was I'd been thinking about these concepts for quite a while, and at some point it got over to where it was a simpler way of saying it. And when it became a simpler way of saying it, I thought, oh, it's not that big. But it was people like you and Andy that made me say, oh, maybe it's because it got to the other side of complexity that it's simpler.
Yeah.
So I remember you said, yeah, you'd love to work with me on it. And I was just going to take advantage of your writing skills because I'm not really a professional writer. And then I sent you an outline of what I thought the content should be. I think that it was around Christmas time of 2016 that I had this crazy idea. And I really thought it was a dumb idea. I thought Stacy's going to laugh at me. So I sent you an email saying, well, I'm thinking maybe this ought to be a story instead of a traditional business book. Yeah. And you did answer me in a positive way, but I always wondered what you were thinking.
Yeah, so I remember that a tiny bit differently. What I remember, so this is interesting, is we had completed this draft outline together, and I remember when we went to do the first day of interviews, you had come with this kind of whole reworked outline. Maybe you had mentioned it a little beforehand, but you had come in with this totally kind of new approach to this book that we had drafted out. And so of course you basically pitched the idea for this story and I listened, and it was a completely different project than I'd ever worked on before. And so part of me was thinking, this is a little scary to approach this topic through a story, and what if it falls flat? And the other part of me was really excited because it was so different, different for me, different for you, and I think different in the category of leadership books.
Yeah, well, however it ended up happening, probably your memory's better than mine because of my age, but however it ended up happening, I remember that when I felt like I got some encouragement from you, that really, it triggered something in me. It's like all of a sudden I had permission to do something, and the story really opened up to me.
Yeah.
And because I have a background in theater and I've written plays, I sort of started approaching it like, well, here's scene 1 and scene 2, and we have to have this introduction, and then the introduction of tension, and the tension builds, and then I was thinking of that typical model. But what I love about working together is that I think at a conceptual level, but when it comes to the details, I don't have the resilience to really dig into all the details, and boy, are you tenacious.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was pretty interesting. So, I've written a lot of nonfiction books, worked with authors to write books, and I've also written my own book, nonfiction, but I'd never written a fiction, written a novel or a business fable before. And one thing that I thought was really exciting for me, I'm an artist. I like to make sculptures and paint and draw. And I felt like I was able to take this part of myself that creates real things in the real world that often comes from here and translates to here, and marry that with my writing and bring together this kind of making this world in my head and translating that from the story that you built the structure of. And that was really exciting.
Well, and it started with ideas I had, but it didn't take long for me to figure out that we could never do this story without both of our experiences. So it quickly was not just your skills, but it was how you see the world, the kinds of experiences that you've had that gave you a sensitivity to things that I wouldn't have been sensitive. Actually, it would have been phony for me to write that story without you. So how much I appreciate the collaboration.
It was much more enriching than it ever could have been working on it, either of us on our own. I certainly couldn't have written that book on my own. I mean, you are the brains behind the leadership lessons, but it was really exciting to get to bring in my experience as a woman in business and also doing character studies of women actually in the tech industry to bring into this book and craft this story that I feel like is different and impactful.
Yeah. And I love, because we got to do something I really believe in, but it doesn't just always happen. That's really collaborate. That's where you do something together that is greater than either one of you could have done. We really co-created something new. And you don't get, that doesn't happen that often. Those are magic moments when it happens. So it's been wonderful.
It has been wonderful.
I think one of the reasons that this was important for us to tell as a story or as a fable is because the issues we're dealing with are both what I think of as inside-out leadership and outside-in. The struggles that Emily's going through in her organization, in the culture that she's dealing with, and trying to interpret what's going on are outside. They're cultural issues that she's struggling with. But in the midst of that, for her to get the right answer, she's got to go deeper inside herself. So that's the inside out. And I guess you can tell the inside out as a fiction, as a nonfiction book, but putting into a fictional setting, into a story setting, engages our emotions in a way that we couldn't have otherwise. And what I think is so beautiful about the way you helped with this is that you end up falling in love with both characters. And by the end, you identify with them in their personality, in their values, in their soul, I guess you'd say. So it makes it not only, I think, a helpful book from the standpoint of teaching leadership principles and how to grow your leadership influence over a career, but it adds a lot of emotion. And I think that emotion oftentimes is emotion is, if you think about that word, it means creating motive. It's the thing that gives you energy to take a step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's been really exciting to me is that people read the book and they can actually repeat things from it. That doesn't often happen after you read a book. And I think we both know that people who read books like these are often busy. They are hopefully reading a lot of different books on leadership and business or listening to them. And we wanted to create something that would capture their interest and their hearts while also delivering these really timeless lessons on leadership.
Yeah. And you're right. Just today, somebody started telling us one of the models in the book, and he remembered it quite well. He hit it right on the button.
I know, it was quite impressive. Yeah. Very impressive. And it's been exciting to hear even someone I know who flipped to the end of the book, read the ending, and then read through to the end to hear how the end of the book impacted her.
Yeah.
Even after knowing what was going to happen.
I remember the text you forwarded to me from somebody who said, "I'm in the Bahamas and I'm weeping reading your book." And of course, it's not that kind of a book, but it really tells us that we hit the right note because we want people to recognize that leadership is about getting things done, but it's also about who you want to become and the kind of connections that you build with people.
Right.
I like to think that really your leadership journey is something that's very solitary. You have to do a lot of self-reflection to become the best leader you can be, but it's never alone. It's never a solo activity, so it's kind of paradoxical.
Yeah.
It's a deep inner journey, but it's always about connecting with other people.
I hope, one thing I'm hoping with this story format is when companies or groups do kind of group book, book club, or they're reading it together and they're getting ready to read another leadership book, another kind of dry, maybe slightly witty leadership book, that this will be really exciting and fun for them. It'll be really enjoyable.
Yeah, I hope that too.
Yeah.
I want both things to happen.
Yes.
I want them to say, hey, this has great ideas that I can use, that I can put into practice.
Right.
But I want them to be touched at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think story is the way that you do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Stacy, one of the interesting things I've heard from a lot of the folks who've read our earlier drafts before going to print is they ask us if we intentionally wrote the characters to represent us. And I don't think we did that intentionally. I think it happened by mistake. Yeah. One of the interesting things is I look at you like you could be my daughter because I have a son who's older than you.
Yep.
But I think we just thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to bring these characters to life? And the more that we worked with them, the more autobiographical it became for both of us. And I wouldn't say 100% of the time. Sometimes I'm thinking through the eyes of Emily, and you're probably thinking through the eyes of David.
Yes.
But for the most part, you helped me a lot to take a lot of the experiences that I've had throughout my career and make them David's experiences. They're not exactly literal, but they're really capturing some things that some of the things I learned the hard way, some of the joys as well.
I had so much fun listening to you tell stories about your experience, and getting to take that and recast it through David was really a lot of fun. It was also really fun for me as a mom to young children. Many of the scenes in the book that take place between Emily and Henry are actual stories. There's a scene about Henry building and knocking down these blocks, and he says, "I'm a dino constructor," and my daughter Lily did that. And there's a couple of other things that were real things that happened, even the night before I wrote the chapter or in the recent past. And it was so much fun. I felt like I was capturing a little bit of my life through this character, and I really enjoyed that.
And I know that one of your favorite places is Camel's Back Park.
Yes.
My wife and I have fallen in love with it as well. We do a lot of hiking out there, but you do a lot of running there.
Yes.
So it was really great to be able to incorporate that. And then, of course, there's this, for Boise, a unique coffee shop, Slow by Slow, which is where a lot of it takes place. Actually, it's a coffee shop owned by one of my son's classmates.
Right.
And he's in the first chapter of the book. Not my son, but his classmate.
Yes. And I spent a lot of time writing there, actually. I would go in the morning and I'd camp out there for a few hours and work on the draft. And some of the scenes in the book were inspired by things that I saw while I was there and experienced. And I really got to know the space. So I could bring that space to life through the writing.
This is what I mean about your tenacity for detail. That and as we got to know our characters, we each had our own way of helping to define the character. You know that in the work I do, we run a lot of psychometrics on people. So we actually created a profile for this character using our tools, and you went out and interviewed people that were in those kinds of roles. So, just another example of collaborating. I'm glad you did what you did. And it was easy for me to do the part that I did because it's the world that I live in.
Yeah. Oh, and you did a full debrief of Emily. You created a whole
I think it was a 70-page profile of who she was.
I think about 90 minutes or 2 hours going through this full profile to understand. We didn't spend as much time on David's, but we wanted to make sure that we really understood what drives her, what she cares about. Yeah. So we got to know her
and
well.
even though we didn't do it together, I was thinking through David's behavioral style and what were his driving motivators, and I was thinking through those things as we talked about his character. So
felt like
it's
really
a different
knew
way
them.
to write, to use the stuff we know how to do to build a character.
Yeah, it was a wonderful process developing them. One of the things that we spent a lot of time on was defining the audience.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we're hoping is that this book will appeal across generations, across genders, across types of leadership, aspiring leaders, that really it's a story for everyone. And what do you feel like was important to you about that audience, to understand about that audience?
Well, part of the problem I have is I want to write to everybody.
Right.
I want the world to be my audience, and people like you get me to dial it in a little bit. Probably the most important person I wanted this story to be for is somebody who's an emerging leader who has their career in front of them.
Right.
In a way, they're going to get the greatest benefit from it because they're going to be able to use the things that they learn by reading the book over and over and over again. And similar to other books that we've worked on, I hope it's a book that they read and then a couple years later they pull it out and read it again, and it reignites things. It reignites memories of what they were working on, because the things that the principles, the concepts that we talk about in the book really should serve somebody through their entire career.
Right.
I guess I'd like people who are already in significant leadership roles to read it, both so that they can think about the fact that their leadership journey isn't over, that as long as you're breathing, there's more for you to learn, but also that they could use it to mentor other leaders as well. So those were the primary. Of course, I hope my kids will read it.
Yes.
I hope they'll say, "Dad, it helped me."
Yeah.
But and your kids when they get a little bit older.
Yep.
But the primary group, I think, is that emerging leader, and it could be a woman or it could be a man. But I hope it gives them ideas of how they can navigate their leadership journey and not just be reacting to what's happening, but to be able to make choices that are going to help them fulfill more of what they aspire to.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that especially excites me about this book is that I feel like we are adding to the dialogue of women in leadership. And we chose to approach that with real, actual strategies men and women can use, but we chose to do it through the lens of a woman, right? A 30-year-old woman. And what was interesting is, in the midst of writing this, the Me Too movement began, the media lit up. And it's not like it was a new problem, but it was a problem that was suddenly getting focused. The spotlight was on it.
And it forced us to talk about how much should that influence our writing.
Yeah.
I remember because we were in the middle of a lot of significant work when that brought up. And we do make a brief reference to it in the book. We decided that wasn't going to be the primary focus because the message in the book is a little broader than that.
Yeah.
But I hope that this helps that whole circumstance that we're dealing with as a society right now for everybody, for women, for men who are trying to understand how to be more virtuous, trying to understand how to be better leaders themselves.
Yeah.
I hope that it helps everybody to take more of a character-based approach
Right.
to the way that leadership develops inside an organization. You know, it's so funny that we respect or we might look up to people because of the title they have, or we may really admire what somebody knows, but when it's all said and done, what we really care about is who is the person. How do they live their life? How do they treat other people? How much are they trying to be the best version of themselves?
Yeah.
And I hope that that's what people get from reading the book.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think what really stands out to me is the intentionality that's required to be a great expert leader, a great positional leader, and a great character leader. And one of the things that Emily really focuses on is a shift from I don't have control to actually I have a lot more control than I think that I do. I have a lot more influence than I thought that I did.
Yeah.
And she takes real steps to gain influence, but it really starts inside. It starts with a shift in perspective.
That still happens for us. Even though I'm in the 5th decade of my career, I still have to go back and think about how do I optimize my influence to create good results.
Right.
Both to create good results and to live a life worth living.
One of the things I'm really excited about for you is I feel like this message can catch on fire. And I'm really excited to see your influence grow. I mean, you're already so influential globally, but to see that connect for emerging leaders and the difference that that can make for people, that's a really meaningful impact for you to make.
Yeah, thank you. One last thing I'm excited about is the Audible version of the book, because we made this conscious decision to use actors, and we have one actor for Emily and another for David.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about the benefit that people would get from getting the Audible version as well. Well, great chatting with you, and
Likewise,
it's going to be an exciting future.
it is.